I had a wonderful day with Adele, so I'm full of Baba's love and so many amazing things to hear about in the early days. And that was one of the reasons that, though I came out for secular reasons to California this time, we had a very big meeting in Sacramento yesterday. It seems like it was last week now, but it was yesterday, for a statewide project in California that we're working on. Religious liberty issues in public education. This is what I do in the secular world, the real world, whatever you call it, and whatever it is. But today, I wanted to make sure to spend some time with Adele for some work that we're doing, thinking about Marina Machiavelli, and Adele is one of the last people alive who can tell us what it was really like to be there in those days when Marina was giving talks about Baba, living in New York, and so it was a really wonderful experience. When I was with Adele today, I thought, well, whatever else is going on in our lives or in groups or Baba's work, the links are so important. We may not know exactly how it all works or fits together, but we are so fortunate to have that link with the early days, and someone like Adele who brings that history and that life with her. So it's a great blessing that Baba keeps some of his early ones with us so that we can keep that historical link and that spiritual link as well. And I'm so delighted to be coming back this summer to Savas. And it's such a great experience to be there. I feel very deeply honored to be invited, especially this year, of course, because I never thought that I would see the day when Nehru would actually be a guest of Savas. And I can't believe my good fortune to be there when she's there. It's a terrific honor. And it's going to be a very special time to have her there. I mean, she doesn't have to say anything. She just has to be there. It's just unbelievable. What she brings with her in terms of history and connection is just going to be very, very explosive in our hearts, I know. I wanted to share with you a little bit tonight about Baba, and then give you a chance to talk about things you'd like to talk about. Because in the midst of jet lag, and the fact that I think last week I counted I was on 7 airplanes and seven airplanes, 7 planes. Secular planes. Very secular, I can agree with that. And I think 5 cities in 4 days or something bizarre. I counted it up. But so, given all of that, I wasn't sure exactly what was going to come out tonight, but I wanted to share with you something that's very important to me this week. And just from the heart, and not in the sense of a formal talk or anything, but just share some things that have been coming to me this week as being central in my life and perhaps might connect up with some of you in your lives with Baba. And the theme that's been on my mind and heart this week is that Meher Baba has to go in order to come. And I wanted to bring the quote from the Bible where Jesus talks about his leaving in the Gospel of John, because that's really where it's most clearly said. And I forgot to do that, but some of you remember that Jesus said that he would have to leave now in order that he could send the Spirit, the Holy Spirit. And the reason that's been on my mind and heart this week is because it was 30 years ago that I last saw Meher Baba in physical form. Remember, I am always with you. Actually, he said that on November 10th, 1966. But November 10th, 1962 was when he last saw those of us who were at the East-West gathering. But before I tell that, I should give a little bit of an introduction to that, because I think it sets the context. It's very true that to be with Meher Baba in his physical form is a great thing. One shouldn't take away from that by saying how wonderful it is to live with Baba now, which is true, which is my experience of Baba, how close Baba is. In fact, I always remember Elizabeth answering the question about Meher Baba being here and leaving and coming. After Baba dropped the body, Elizabeth had a visitor, and I happened to be sitting there in the living room. And the visitor must have been a person from the community, maybe even a minister, someone from the community who came to visit and didn't know a lot about Meher Baba, but knew of her connections from the early days. I say may have been a minister because Elizabeth didn't see everyone who came, but if it was someone rather difficult, not that ministers are difficult, but but they can be a little more challenging than other people, and you want to have just the right person to meet, you know what I mean, to say the right thing. Most of us just wouldn't do. So on that kind of occasion, Elizabeth always came out to see the person, and so I think it might have been a minister on this occasion, and it was not long after Baba had dropped the body, because I remember he was trying to be gracious and commiserate and said, well, Mrs. Patterson, I know this must be a difficult time for you, and you must miss Meher Baba. I know you lived in India and you were very close. And she looked at him and she twinkled and smiled and said quite spontaneously, without even thinking, she looked up and she smiled and she said, "Oh," she said, "no, don't you see, he's so much more available now." And she said it so spontaneously and with such joy that it pierced my heart, and I realized that even though, yes, of course, she missed Baba, but she meant that, and it was true. It was her experience. And I realize it's been my experience too. He's made himself so available. But that doesn't take away from the beauty of being with him physically. In fact, being with him physically is why probably all of us long for him now. Probably the reason that all of us have this deep sense of familiarity and this longing to touch him and to be with him, to be his companion and all that. Because we have somewhere in our memory, our hearts, we know what it's like to touch him and to be with him. And that plants that longing, so you want more of that. Even though we know in our minds that isn't the final, the great, the real thing that Baba gives, but it's that which causes us to long for him. If that's what causes us to long for him, then that's a great thing. So yes, it is a great thing, only because it creates in us a longing for the greater thing that Baba will give. But being human beings, of course, we long to be with him, to be his companions. And everyone here, I'm sure, as sure as I can be of anything, everyone here has had that experience of walking with him and touching him. And that's why we feel so familiar and we want to touch him again. Well, for me, of course, as a child, this was particularly important because for children, being with someone is very concrete and real. And when Baba left in 1958, when he left Myrtle Beach, naturally I felt devastated at first. Wondered, if I would ever see him again. Thought about how far away India is. It seems very far away. When you're 8 years old, it's very far away. And longed to see him. Missed him. Pined over him. In fact, became almost inconsolable when he first left. And I remember wandering in the woods center in Myrtle Beach, wondering, did he think of me and all that, remember me, missing him terribly. It was the beginning, of course, of discovering that he lives with me, but the beginning of that discovery is to miss him, to long for him. And actually, the wonderful thing, a very sweet gift that Baba gave, just as that was reaching its height, was a letter came to Elizabeth from Mani, in which Mani described Baba watching the 1958 films were taken of this trip to Myrtle Beach. And in the note, which Elizabeth copied out by her hand, so I have a copy now, and then sent it over. In the note, Mani wrote that Baba had seen these films in 1958 with the girls, the women Mani, and that Baba pointed out to them every time my white head popped up in the film, or Wendy's would pop up in the film, Baba would lean forward and point and say, that's Charles, that's Wendy. So Mehera and Mani and all could see who he had told them about, who they had not met. And as soon as I got that message, of course, I felt such joy, because then I realized that he did remember me. He was thinking of me. It wasn't just my imagination. But still, 58 to 62 is 4 years. And 4 years in the life of a child is a long, long time. And I began to be more intimate with Baba as a child. I began to talk to him, how children are. After that message, I began to feel, maybe, he remembers me and I can talk to him and all that. So I began to do that. I began to talk to him and write bad poetry to him, which Baba's very grateful I no longer do that. But he endured it for years. Very terrible poetry. But I would do that, and Baba would be in that way with me. But yet, the longing also grew simultaneously to see him again. The longing grew and grew and grew. And so why this is the preface to the story, is because one has to know how this child felt before going to India. I felt such tremendous anticipation that I can't describe it to you. 4 years of anticipation. And I know this is hard to believe and perhaps not entirely believable to even say it, but every day, every single day, I would think maybe today will be the day. And we'll get a word to come. And that's all I lived for. The mail would come, the phone would ring, and I can remember thinking, my first thought, see how Baba is, this is how I get you to think of it. My first thought was, will there be a message for us to come? Will Baba call? And of course it didn't come, and all that, and Baba was in seclusion, and so we didn't have contact. So I got more anxious about it. One of the great sources of anxiety, and this is very revealing to say this today, but one of the great sources of anxiety was that he would break his silence. That I was concerned about more than anything else, that he would do that. And this is a terrible thing to admit, but I was a child, so I can be forgiven. I really almost prayed that he wouldn't do that. So selfish, but how children are. We focus on one thing. And you see, the reason for that is, as you probably would guess, if he broke his silence and the whole world came to him, then where would I be? Somewhere in the back. Baba said that would happen. He did. How Baba would give these images of this breaking silence, and some of them would be very frightening to me as a child. You know, there'd be all these people and all that, and Baba said, you know, it would be very difficult to be near. And also Baba said things like this: love me, love me, love me. Now, after I break my silence, it will be too late. Well, I don't know how you feel about that, but I knew that I wasn't loving him enough, you know, and I wasn't getting it all in time, and any minute he was going to break his silence. And then, you know, be too late means, of course, everybody will know. His love will be obvious. To love him when it's not obvious is so intimate, is so special, it's such a tremendous gift. And I knew that we were in a very, very special time, and I wasn't sure how long it was going to last. So I had a great anxiety, not only that I wouldn't get to be near him again, and he has thousands and thousands, maybe millions of people to deal with. He's not going to have time for me, so that was one thing, but the other thing was it would be too late. I mean, it'd be obvious. I guess it's like, so I imagined it something like when Constantine converted, you know, and everybody was Christian overnight. Then it was an obvious thing to be a Christian or whatever, and in that sense, too late. Too late to follow him when it's a great risk, which is really what love is all about. It's that great risk. So, for 4 years, I lived with this feeling of, when are we going to see him again? I must see him again. I must love him more now. It's a great motivation, I can tell you. By the time 1962 came around and Baba sent word that we could see him again, I had just unbelievable expectations, and my heart was really just to explode. You can imagine now, after 4 years, by this time now I'm 13 years old, which is a very crucial moment for a child, a very important time in the life of a child. It's initiation time. And so, the word came that we could come and be with him. Well, I couldn't believe it. Really speaking, I couldn't take it in. But of course, it was true. The plans went forward. Reservations were made. It became more and more real. Still, I didn't believe it. And I'll spare you all of the detail of that anxiety, but finally, we got on the plane and we went. And I just almost became numb, because it was by this time too much to take in. And again, after 4 years, every day, you have to remember, that's how I was. Call me a bit obsessive, but that's how I was. And it's really true, you know, and I just couldn't take this in. And the day came for us to go to Guru Prasad for the first time. And we went separately first at a time. This was before the actual darshan program. The men and women went separately. And women first, and then men. So we all arrived, and we had to stand on line to wait our turn to greet Baba, of course. So there was a long line coming out. I stood on that line, and it's hard to say how it felt, but something like it can't really be Baba, first of all. It can't be Baba. And what was behind that feeling was something that maybe you all will identify with. You know, Baba is so intimate that sometimes it's unbelievable. That is this just my imagination? Is this intimacy and this inner relationship something I've created? Or is it really true? Is it the beloved? Do you feel sometimes, I mean, it's so intimate that it almost seems like it's only something, for a moment, one might think, is this really possible? Is it possible that the beloved knows everything about me? Is it all just coincidence? Then he gives you a reminder, and then you feel, yeah, it is Bob and all that. But I don't know how. Do you feel this sometimes? You go through this, you wonder. The whole world says that this can't be possibly the case. This beauty, this love can't be true, can't be real. But then he finds a way to let you know it is. So I was at that moment standing in line, and I just said, this can't be. That is to say, Baba, the one I've been writing the bad poetry to, and spending so much time and thinking and all that phone ringing and the telegram coming, and he's there, he's sitting. And also in 4 years, he was no longer, well, I knew now that the world, many people felt that he was God in human form, that he was the Christ. So then that added on to my anxiety, Could he be sitting in a chair, in a sofa in this room? So as the line crept closer to the doorway, and we took our shoes off, to go in group side, I had this sudden experience of real feeling that maybe he wasn't there. This couldn't be. Now that wasn't intellectual, mind you, it was just an emotional experience. And I guess it also was a feeling a fear that maybe he was there, but he wouldn't know me. I mean, after all, he's been busy. He's the God man, he has a lot to do. There's the whole world to deal with, much less the universe, And here I'm walking in here expecting him to remember all these things that we've talked about for 4 years. Suddenly to think that it could be located in this man in this chair just seemed to be impossible. So I crossed the threshold of the room, and there was this feeling in the room that seemed very, very familiar to me. What I now think of as the Baba feeling. But then it just seemed something very familiar. And as soon as I felt it, I was looking ahead and just saw people. I couldn't see Baba yet. I saw from the line a hand shoot up in the air like that. And as soon as I saw the hand, I knew it was Baba. I don't know why, but just that hand was all the gesture. Baba must have made a gesture like that. And as soon as I saw the gesture, I knew on every level of my heart it was Baba. That was all. And then I relaxed. Then I was happy. I just stood in line, waiting my turn, because now I knew he was there. And it was all true. I don't know why, but in that instant it was all true. And then, because I still had my turn to come, I remembered what I wanted. Because this is also a very revealing thing to say, but and also somewhat myopic, I suppose, now that I look back. But one of the things that I wanted when I saw Baba again between 58 and 62 was to remember what he felt like. And that came back to me. And I suddenly got very interested in that. Because the reason that I got interested in that is because in 58, after he left, I couldn't remember what he felt like. even though we had embraced and touched and all that, I couldn't remember what he felt like. I guess because I was thinking of other things, probably more important things. But never mind, it bothered me that I couldn't actually remember how he felt. And I had told myself, growing up, that when I saw him again, I was going to remember what he felt like. You can imagine, here I am after 4 years, and this is what I'm now focusing on. But never mind, this is how it was. Because I was now happy, I knew he was Baba, so I guess this crept into my consciousness. So by the time I got to the front of the line, I was prepared for this. What I missed by being focused on this, I will never know. But probably something really great. But never mind. I was now honed in on this. I was gonna remember. Baba wasn't gonna trick me again, and then I'd go away and not remember. I got up to the front of the line, and Erich, as always, standing there, Erich said, like he did for each person, Charles Baba. Erich, it's Baba's memory. So, Erich had noted down every person, 58, and put by their name, what order Baba had given them and all that. So, always Erich would know. He would know. He worked, he still does that. In his room, every morning, he has the list of people coming. Who's new, who's coming again, where they're from, and all that. And if that list of people who are coming that day is not fulfilled, that is, if he goes into Mondley Hall and then so-and-so isn't there, then he asks Ivana, whoever prepared the list, on the list so-and-so, where are they, have you heard from them, and all that. So you see, he's still doing that. He's very attentive to every detail of every person so he can introduce them to Baba. Today he does that. It's incredible. So he said my name, and Baba, of course, looked at me, how you've grown. But really, when Baba did that, which he also did when he met me in 58, then it was a bit odder because I hadn't seen him before. But when he did it this time, it made more sense to me, not mine, because I had grown somewhat. And there I was, and Baba looked up at me. And then he opened his arms. So I ran to Baba and embraced him. And after 4 years, it's just there's no words for that. First embrace after 4 years of longing for that. And that's all I longed for. That was literally the only thing I ever thought about. And then that's all I wanted. But then as I embraced Baba, I remembered, what does it feel like? And I drew back a little bit. I'm a little embarrassed to tell you now this, but I leaned next to Baba and I rubbed him on his cheek. Rubbed him on his cheek, and it was like a baby's bottom, very smooth. Baba liked to be clean shaven, and I hadn't started shaving, so I rubbed him on his cheek, and I could feel him. Then I went to the other side, and I rubbed him on the other cheek. I noticed when I went from one side to another, Bob was looking at me. What are you doing? But I didn't care. I went to the other cheek, and I rubbed him pretty vigorously. Meanwhile, all these people are waiting in line, taking all my time, and rubbing him on the cheek. And then, if that wasn't enough, I stood back, I looked at Baba. Baba was looking at me as if to say, what next now? I took him by the shoulders, and I squeezed him. Can you believe it? I recently recalled this because of the 30th anniversary of East West Gathering. I hadn't recalled this in many years because I blocked it out. well, I'm glad I did it. You know, I'm glad I did it. But anyway, I squeezed Baba, and so I could feel what his body felt like. And being very introverted, the only way we can remember things is if we think about it and we concentrate on what we're doing. Otherwise, particularly if you're very introverted, those of you who are that way, you don't remember where your car's parked. You know what I mean? You don't remember anything. So I squeezed him, and I can feel it to this day because I concentrate. So I got my wish. And then we had the darshan, of course, which is a great thing, and another story. But this is the preface to the story I was going to tell. I'm getting worse than Eric. Just the preface, because all of that is to say that it was very, very important to make that contact with Baba. For me, it's very, very important. Even though, now that I look back, Baba was much closer to me on a day-to-day basis, much closer companion than he was during the East-West gathering. No doubt about that. Walking in those woods in Myrtle Beach, Baba was much closer to me and more intimate. And the only reason that I recognized him and knew that gesture is because we had been conversing for 4 years. So I didn't grasp all that at the time, and now I see that. But for me it was important to make that physical contact. At the end of the darshan, Baba told us goodbye. This was after, I guess, November 5th, Baba said goodbye. And that was very painful. No way around that, I'm sure for most people. I know I speak for myself. It was very painful because somehow I felt in my heart I would never see him in form. That this would be it. Even in '65, when the word came we could go, and then he canceled. When the word first came that we could go, I didn't believe it. And then it was canceled, I didn't get upset, because I never believed we would see him. When the word came to go in '69, I never felt that I would see him. But that's just in me, But I just felt that last day in '62 that this was it. This was my last time to be in his physical presence. And I was very unsure about how to capture him forever. And those 4 or 5 days, I had done all I could to drink in as much as possible of what it meant to be in his physical presence. But I didn't know. It was beyond my capacity. So this last day, of course, was devastating because I knew that I didn't know what to do. It was beyond, and he was leaving the room. So, which is again a whole nother story. And he left. And, I was weeping, as were many people. And then he left. He walked out of the room. And I just, went through the motions the next few days. We went to see, some people had to go back to the West. My brother went back to school and all that. Baba said that was it. But others stayed a little longer to see MeherBabaLibrary, Meherazad. And Baba encouraged us to go and see the tomb, that's now the tomb and all that. So we did that. But for me, I don't even remember. I went through it in kind of, slow motion. I can remember kind of getting on a bus and going places in the tomb and all that. But I just was, again, not sure what to think, feel. It was very devastating. And all the tears, I didn't think I had it. I didn't think I had that much in me, that many tears. And then, you know, after we went to MeherBabaLibrary, MeherBabaLibrary, all that, we were ready to go back to our homes in the West. The word came to where we were staying that Baba is leaving Pune to go to MeherBabaLibrary, and anyone who would like can come and say goodbye under the tree in Bun Gardens. Can you imagine? Anyone who would like? And the wonderful thing about that was, one of the many wonderful things was, there were no more tears. That's how Baba is. I mean, he wrung it out, at least of my heart. I can't speak for anyone else. But there was nothing left. No sadness at all. We went over to Bun Gardens, and there was nothing but joy. And Baba had said, no embraces, no messages. Baba was just leaving town, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. He always left Pune that way. He always went to sit under that tree, and then he went on, and this was just another one of those. So it was natural, it was joyful, it was simple. We all arrived, those who were still there, and some of the Easterners. It wasn't an overwhelming crowd, but it was a good-sized crowd. And we just sat there, and Baba came, and he had a chair, and he sat in the chair. And there we were. And it was so happy, I mean, it was so joyful. And I couldn't make myself feel sad. It was impossible. It was as though, it was as though Baba was saying, I'll never leave. There is nothing to be sad about. I'll never leave. And if you think I have left, here I am. I was that glad, and there he was, sitting there. But it wasn't, oh, I'm seeing Baba again. Oh, I won't see him again. It had transcended that. I can't explain more than that, but you get the sense. So, there we were sitting around Baba, and Baba looked so beautiful and radiant that day. You've seen photos of it. He looked like this. It's a small photo, so it's hard to see. I can pass around Baba if I get it.
I'll get it back.
I'll pass it. I carry around it. This is how he looked on that November 10th, 1962. Look how happy Baba looks. And his pink coat. And we were also happy, joyful, really joyful. And he was so sweet, Baba. So natural in that. I think Baba was really at his best. And he was just chit-chat. Because when he was doing that, he made every little thing seem so special. You sleep well? Yes, Baba. Your health. I'm fine now, Baba. I like that. We pick people out, and just little things, Isn't it amazing? I mean, one of the things that's amazing about those exchanges, I'm sure that you back me up on this. Those of you who've had this experience, Baba, I'm sure nobody ever stopped to think, why doesn't he know whether my tummy ache is healed or not? Why doesn't he know whether I slept well? Or why is he asking me how I got here today? Nobody sat there and said, wait a minute. This is the avatar, okay? Now he's asking me how I got here today. Why? Because in his asking, how's your health, or what time is it, as though God man can't tell time. Like that, you know. In the asking, he always made one feel that he knew your heart, and he saw it through and through. That's the only way I can explain it, because otherwise we would have stopped the thing. He didn't have to read your mind, Baba. He could be just the one who you had to tell, you know, is it lunchtime, is it, have you eaten, all that. He could be that, and at the same time, be the one who knew you better than anyone ever could know you. And I can't tell you, it's not imagination. Really speaking, I think people almost universally had that experience in his presence, that one felt that he knew. Not he knew every little thought or mind or whatever that your mind of, you are from California, you are, you know, Baba wasn't like that. I'm glad to say. Baba was not, he was not some psychic, he was not some guru who you know, predicted things for you and all that. He was never that way. Baba was the furthest thing from that. He would, you know, where are you from? I'm from California. And you never thought, well, what does he know? You know? You never thought that, because he made you feel that he knew your heart, that he loves you, you love him, and you also felt that Baba is in here, not there. That was his way of awakening us to the truth. The truth is that Baba was not in the chair there any more than he's anywhere in one particular place. He lives in every heart. And the only reason he comes and sits in the chair is to awaken people to the fact that he is in them. So he's getting us to tell him. So that we begin to know that he's in our hearts. That's all.
He sat in that chair.
Sat in that chair.
I know Chris won.
Yeah, that's his chair. So that's how it was that day, where he would just find people and say things or ask things, you know, in the crowd. And this is another photo of that day that some of you may have seen. I think Darwin must have taken. You know, Darwin is so good about that. Not only does he take these wonderful things, but then he sends them to his son. Or his son. But here is Baba with the people around him, and I like this because since I was blonde, you know, the sun shone up on me and I can see where I am. sitting near Baba. Here's my head, and here's Baba there. And so just to give you the feel for it, you see, I'm sitting near Baba as close as I could possibly get to his feet. And I'm straining like this just in case he might look in my direction. Because naturally, I wanted Baba to notice me. I mean, he's got all these people, but every one of us is thinking the same thing. And so Baba, you know, finally he knows he's just down. You know, he knows that. You know, he knows that because I'm like this the whole time. How could he miss it? So Baba looks over at me, and Baba gestures at me, and Baba says, "And where's your mother?" And I had no idea. I hadn't had any idea for days. You know, it was such a shock that I stopped and thought about it. I thought, where indeed? You know, and it's interesting because she had really, my family, everybody disappeared for the whole time. And so I started to say, I don't know Baba. And just as I was saying that, Baba was smiling at me. And I said, because it pleased Baba that I didn't know. I felt that. Because, he wanted it just to be him, no one else. And just as I was about to tell Baba I didn't know, Baba pointed in the back of the crowd. And I looked behind me, and there was my mother standing there. And Elizabeth was on one side, and Kitty was on the other, and they were standing at the edge of the crowd. And Baba pointed at them like that, and I looked and saw them. I said, yes, Baba, Baba. Because there were three of them standing together. Kitty, Mother, and Elizabeth. And it actually turned out that the three of them didn't know it then, but they would be working together for years, many years. And you know how Baba has everything already planned. And sometimes he hints at what the plan is, sometimes. This was one of those times, probably.
Charles said when you had three mothers.
Three mothers, well, that's a nice interpretation. I'll tell you the truth, Pat. You know what I thought? When he pointed at Mother and did like this, I thought he meant trio. It means John, Charles, Winslow. But then I looked and I saw Elizabeth and Kitty. So I think maybe he meant the three. But maybe he meant three mothers. Certainly it turned out to be true for me also. I did have no greater gift except for his love, and it's the same thing in my life and Elizabeth. So then it was time, for Baba to leave town, and he got up to go and get in the car, and he had to be helped. Baba was in pain, he couldn't walk well, so he had to have people help him. And he had to get to the car with people getting in there. They drove the car as close as possible, so otherwise he would never have gotten to the car. And then it dawned on me that this was it. And Baba had kind of suspended that for the whole time. I don't know how long we were there, probably not long. With Baba, it's hard to tell sometimes. So it dawned on me suddenly that Baba was actually getting in the car and he's leaving. So naturally, I wanted to say something. I wanted to see him one last time. Then I suddenly got all excited about this idea. And we got in the car, and the car was inundated with people. And everybody had the same idea at the same time. One last touch, one last glance, one last word from him or whatever. Suddenly that became everybody's focus naturally. So whatever hundreds of people there were at the gathering there around the tree engulfed the car. And I began to struggle to get to the car. And I struggled, and I pushed, and I struggled. Well, the truth is, I was shameless in those days. I'm much nicer now. This is, you know what it is. You grow up and then you don't get away with as much. It's true. 13, everybody says, oh, isn't that cute? They don't feel the way. When you're 43, they feel no longer cute. And I made my way through that crowd somewhat vigorously. Really speaking, because I saw the car was about to break through, and I knew that I only had this last opportunity, so I started making my way through this crowd, and I really had a moment of panic where I thought, I'm not going to make it. because some people were breaking the crowd apart so the car could get through. So I thought, well, I could see that happening. I thought, oh, I'm not going to make it. So I redoubled my efforts. And I did get to the car. I got to the car just as it was on the edge of the crowd. I reached Baba's window. And Baba's window was down. Baba was just sitting there smiling at people as the car made its way slowly through. And I got to the window. And then, of course, I didn't know what to say. Because, I don't know, maybe you can imagine how you would feel, but what is the last thing you say? What do you say? What is there to say? There's everything to say. There's nothing to say. But there I was. I had gotten my wish. I was there. And I couldn't think of anything to say. So, while I was paralyzed, what bubbled out of my mouth was the stupidest thing of all, of course. I mean, I said, "Goodbye, Baba." And, it's like famous last words. You kind of want to think, oh, I should say something. I couldn't. I had already told Baba that I loved him. And, after that, what do you say? I mean, I didn't tell him out loud, I whispered in his ear. During the gathering, I whispered in his ear that I loved him. And Baba met me. But, so I had nothing left to say except goodbye, Baba. And, and then he looked up at me and pointed at me and smiled. Baba said, "Be happy." And then he said, "This gesture can mean many things." Baba said that to me almost every time that I saw him, 58 and 62. When I would be standing in front of him or he'd notice me, he would point to me. So I was familiar with that gesture, but it was never interpreted. So no voice from Erich to say, Baba says. So it was up to me to take it for whatever I heard Baba say. And I, at that moment, didn't take anything in. But I knew that later, later Elizabeth said to me when I told her that, she said, well, Baba wants you to become perfect in his love. But also, Baba used it to say, I'm pleased. I'm happy. I'm happy with your love. And if that last moment at the door had been the only time I had with MeherBaba, physically, that would have been enough. Because now, all of these years later, I realize that in those two gestures, in that glance, he said everything I need to know for my life. But not did he say it because it was an order from Baba. I take it as an order from Baba, first of all. He pointed at me in a very serious, and I now know that there was one thing he was saying, not two just arbitrary things. He was saying one thing to me, and he was giving me an order. But he was also fulfilling the order as he was giving it. Years later, when Baba sent a cable, at a very crucial moment in my life, which is another story, one of the things in the cable was, Charles Windy John is it? Must not and will not let me down. The two were always together with Father. That is, try your best, obey my order. This is what I want for you, but it's already fulfilled at the same time. So now, as I look back, I feel this pattern in my life as it unfolds, and it's still unfolding, but I feel today, 30 years later, almost to the day, I feel that that order Baba gave me has something to do with he wanted me to be happy, to try to be happy, and to know that he accepts me and loves me as I am. He's pleased. And that would be the source of my happiness. Follow? The source of the happiness would be the reality that he is pleased and that he accepts us. The only joy in our life with Baba, I would say, is in letting go of that which isn't real. And the only way to let go of what isn't real is to know that he loves us and accepts us. Whatever happens, however life unfolds, whoever we are, so that we go through all of these things and we can be happy in the midst of it all because we know that he accepts us just as we are. And the drama unfolds, the play unfolds, Act 1, Act 2, Scene 3, and all that, which we all are going through now. We have all these little dramas that we go through. And they're very serious and important to us, sometimes overwhelming, but they're still just dramas. And the only joy in the drama, the only way to play the part, I would say, with any joy, is to know that it is in fact drama, A, and B, the director loves us. Even when we give a bad performance, miss our lines, forget our cue, that he accepts us just as we are. I didn't know it yet, but those two gestures, that order from Baba, would be the theme of my life. Baba knew, as only Baba knows, how hard it would be for me to be happy. How very difficult to discover even the beginning of the key to being happy. And he also knew that once I discovered how to be happy, to begin to be happy, which I'm beginning to discover, I'm happy to report. Only beginning to discover. But that's enough. He knew that the only way to even begin to discover how to be truly joyful in life with Baba is to know that he's pleased and that he accepts me just as I am. Not to just think it, but to know that that's true. And now, I feel that that order he gave then, I can begin to obey just a little. But only because he wrote that script a long time ago. And I know that he will now make it possible for me to play my part in a way that will be joyful or more joyful. All that's a lot in about 5 seconds of standing at that window and how long it was. But that's how Baba is. In a glance, in a gesture, in a few seconds, your whole life is put before you. And it's not in my imagination. It really is so. My whole life can be summed up by that. That's all I needed. He gave it to me. That gesture. I carry around a picture of that last moment in this book that was given to me. Here I am just about to reach the window with Baba. Here's Baba in his car. Here I am making my way. And just about a few feet later, I make it to the window. And the quote that is underneath the picture is this one, which you all know. Baba says, "Oh, my lovers, I love you all. It is only because of my love for my creation that I have descended on earth. Let not your hearts be torn asunder by my declarations concerning the dropping of my body. On the contrary, accept my divine will cheerfully. You can never escape from me. Even if you try to escape from me, it is not possible to get rid of me. Therefore, have courage and be brave. So what Jesus said is echoed once again. Yes, he has to go. In this limited sense, he has to go in order to come. And for the Spirit, as Jesus said, now as we know, the living presence of God in our hearts can come more and more every day. He only came for that brief time in that beautiful body so that he could leave and really come. And begin to be happy. Creation that I have descended on earth. Let not your hearts be torn asunder by my declarations concerning the dropping of my body. On the contrary, accept my divine will cheerfully. You can never escape from me. Even if you try to escape from me, it is not possible to get rid of me. Therefore, have courage and be brave. So what Jesus said is echoed once again. Yes, he has to go. In this limited sense, he has to go in order to come. And for the Spirit, as Jesus said, now as we know, the living presence of God in our hearts can come more and more every day. He only came for that brief time in that beautiful body so that he could leave and really come. And begin to be happy in his love. Dear God. So, if there's time to talk a little more, I'm happy to. But you have to tell me what you usually do, or you have to circulate or leave.
Now he's young.
This is a
Oh, can I pass my book? Let me see if there's things in it that fall all over the place. I'm certainly not going to sing.
So what did Baba feel like?
Charles is going to sing a song?
That'll be today.
Are there any questions that anyone has?
Charles,
Yes.
I remember in the center, there's Hospital Sahabas, you talked about that second meeting with Baba as the first meeting as being very intimate and sweet and wonderful, and you were like on the pedestal. And then the second meeting was more like in person, and that was real difficult.
You know what you're remembering? This is good you brought this up. You're remembering 3B Dimple's story.
Right.
She tells that story.
Right.
But you know, she didn't check with me before telling my experience. And the truth is, no, that's her experience. My experience was not that. No, it was not that. I tell you, my experience of that second time with Baba was just as I said. It was like the next day. I didn't feel Baba ignored me at all. I didn't feel like I wasn't special. I felt very special. And Baba, I'm so glad you brought that up because I've heard that over the years. That I felt him, Baba, you know, see, because 3B did have that experience. Joking aside. She felt very special in 56, and Baba gave her all this attention. Then she grew up a little bit in 58, and then the spotlight shifted, she thought, to me. And I got all the attention. Then 62 came along, and then I had to go through what she went through in 58. No. I mean, I hate to disappoint her, but if that happened, I didn't notice it. No, in fact, I didn't let Baba get away with anything. And I really am very, very grateful that I didn't to this day. Again, as a shy person, child, an introverted person, today even, I feel, you know, introverted people are usually going to sit in the background and all that. But I was determined not to let that happen with Baba. So, in 62, just one example of that. In 62, we were not supposed to embrace Baba after embracing him in the beginning. I mean, after all, there are all these people. And how could he embrace us all every day? So we weren't supposed to do that. And we were supposed to embrace him when we greeted Baba, and then when we left at the end, embrace him again. Not enough. Really, it was not enough. So, what I would do would be I would stand, you know, when the hall would clear in the morning, I would stand there in front of Baba. We were supposed to leave the hall. Leave the hall means leave the hall. And Baba usually would wait for us to leave the hall until the last day when he left first. Baba would be sitting there, and of course Baba said leave the hall. People were moving out. And I would leave the hall, but I would stand right in front of Baba's seat, and I would back out, inch by inch, very slow. And I would look at Baba the whole time. The most pitiful expression. And really, it was genuine. I felt pitiful. And every morning, every single morning, Baba gave in. Gave in. And so I got an embrace every day. Now, selfish? Absolutely. Inconsiderate of other people. Bordering on disobedience? Yes. But I would do it again. Again, being a child was a great advantage. But did I feel left out? As far as I was concerned, there were only 2 people at the East-West gathering.
So what did Baba feel like?
And update us on Myrtle Beach. How it's going for him.
Well, about what Baba felt like, you know, that's another myth that maybe doesn't need correcting, but there was a lady in New York whose name I can't remember, and I don't want to remember, but she's not with us anymore. But she got in her mind that somehow, I don't know who she was thinking of, but it wasn't me. She would tell people that in 58, I would go up to Baba and I would bite him, hands and feet. You know, I was, no, I would hear this from people and I thought, now how am I ever going to overcome this reputation? So that's what Baba felt like. If that had been me, I can assure you I would have remembered what Baba felt like. Because I would have tasted it. I've never been Baba. I kissed him and all that. So that's another. So even in kissing him and in touching him, and Baba touching me, did not remember how it felt. He felt his face was very, very smooth. It was just, well, like I say, a baby's bottom is all I can describe. Very soft, very smooth, and it smelled wonderful. And see, all of these things I don't usually use in senses, so but this time I did. And he felt very solid, very powerful when I held his shoulders. It felt very powerful. The center is everything is beautiful at the center. It looks more beautiful than ever. Baba is so strong at the center. I've been there this fall more than usual. I've been there twice. Jane was away twice, and I was there filling in, helping out. And so I got to go to Baba's house and show people around Baba's house, which is one of the great things to do. And
That was one of those attitudes.
oh, so wonderful. It was such a great thing, because there, to speak about Baba in that atmosphere, and with people who are new, or I shouldn't say, Elizabeth always said, whenever I'd say, Annie, so-and-so's here, they're new, she'd say, oh, well, they're maybe new to us, but not new to Baba. Yeah. So, showing around these people who are new to me, it's just so wonderful. And Baba's presence is so strong. And every time I take people through Baba's house, I am overwhelmed by how wonderful and sweet Baba is to leave so much of himself, to give so much of himself. Baba's everywhere. All that, but for him to have done that, to created that special atmosphere, not only that, to sustain it, because what can we do? Truth is, we can't do that. We can't manipulate that, even if we wanted to. We couldn't create that. And it's really true. People will be there for the first time, know very little about MeherBaba. They will go into MeherBaba's bedroom, and so many times they will meet MeherBaba in some special way. It's a bedroom. There's a bed, a chest, closet. And what could we do? And that alone says so much to me about Baba. How long he'll do that? What he wants with it, I don't know. But I can tell you right now, that's the most important thing about how the center is. Right now, it's just overwhelming to see that. And we see hundreds of new people. And it's extraordinary. I don't know where they come or how they get there. But I figured out that what Elizabeth has said all along about the center is so true. She used to tell me that, I don't know whether it came up when I asked her, or someone asked her, whether she was disappointed, that Baba would not be coming back. Because, of course, naturally, she would want Baba to come back to the center and all that. And I think someone asked her, that in relation to how she keeps the center so much in readiness as though he is going to come back. And she said, well, you see, the center must always be kept ready. It's very important that the center always be kept ready. Because she said, you see, all the people who come, they bring Baba here. Since she twinkled, she'd say, you see, that's why they find Baba here. Because they bring him in their hearts. So you see, we must always keep the center ready. Because he comes every day. And that was her secret. You know, of how she could motivate herself every day until her mid-80s to see to every little detail. It wasn't because she knew Baba physically wasn't going to come back. And it wasn't just because she wanted things to look nice or whatever. It was because she was preparing for Baba. And that's why her eye was so much valued by everybody. The eagle eye, Elizabeth. It was also painful because you could go in, clean a cabin, get it ready, someone coming. You could spend hours on that thing. It would be perfect, and she would come driving in, you know, with her little hand just over the wheel, you know, with the dog running along. That's how she walked the dog when she could no longer walk, you know. The dog knew, so it'd be like the leash. You have the car, and the dog would go in front of the car on the walk, and then back of the car back to the house. And he loved it. This is his favorite part of the day, and she would always go in like this. This is when she's over 80 years old and sick. She'd go in, slowly get out of the car, come to that cabin, look in, and she never said, oh, it looks so lovely, or you've done such a nice job. It was always, why is that table out of place? Or, doesn't that cabinet need a coat of paint? Or, you know, her eye would go immediately to the one flaw in the room. I mean, it was uncanny. She'd come to the door, her eye would go right to it. And it used to be a little bit difficult if you happened to be on the receiving end, but it was also wonderful because it was a constant reminder that everything had to be right for Baba. And whoever it was who came in to the center, that it could be, you know, when people came in the 60s and maybe they didn't look really like MeherBaba, you know, they looked like street people, and you know, coming with all these problems and long hair and all this. And here's Kitty and Elizabeth, you know, encountering all of this, but every one to them was as though Baba were coming. And that's why the center is what it is. It's because of the love they put in. Kitty had a different eye, but it was also, she found a lot when she went in. Her things were sometimes more esoteric. Like she didn't like all the moss hanging all over the place off the trees. So when it started pulling it down. But whatever it is that they felt had to be right. So, as long as I think we remember that, Baba will stay there. I think as long as Baba will keep coming there, and he will also be staying there.
He said he'd never leave.
He said he'd never leave.
We have time for one more question.
That's the same sound. It's a happy sound.